Thank you so much. It's fantastic to be here, and I also just really want to thank Trent and Whitney and all the organizers who helped me out this morning so that I can be here on this stage. And it's an excitement to get to close out CSSconf, especially because the last time I was here on the stage, I was giving a talk which was really a call to action. And in some ways, I see this talk as perhaps a part 2 of that, or if you haven't seen it, answering some of the questions that I proposed at the end. So I'm going to talk about design systems. But I'm not going to talk about design systems in the normal sense as we're used to hearing about design systems. I want to talk about design systems through the lens of facilitation, right? And so this is really marrying two things that I love. One, systems, especially design systems. And the second thing that I've come to fall in love with over the last couple of years is this topic of facilitation. So what I hope to do for you today is introduce facilitation and to show you how it's actually an incredible and a really powerful tool, and how our design systems really, although we build them to establish consistency across our products, are actually acting as facilitators within our organizations. And how this is super instrumental, and I see as one of the first key steps to helping to transform our organizational structures and actually help us build resilient teams as well as products. So I'm hoping to have some time at the end for questions if you have any questions. This is a really neat facilitation tool. You can go to slido.com on your mobile or your laptop. You can enter the code CSSEU, and you can leave questions. And you can also upvote other people's questions. So if I have enough time at the end, I'll take a look at them. And if we don't get to them, this is a great starting point for you to come find me afterwards. Let's discuss. Let's debate. Tell me what you liked. Tell me what you didn't like. That's what we're here for at this conference, and that's one of the greatest reasons I believe to gather. So thank you for the organizers for making this possible. So as I started working on this talk, I came across this quote by Laurie Voss, and I thought, all right, this is really how I have to start this, because this is getting at the core of sort of my trajectory in my life and how I've come to get to this point of interest. So this is really true for me. The older I get, or the longer I've been working in tech, the more every problem seems to be a matter of getting humans to work together effectively, and it's actually not about the tech itself, right? And so I started out at the beginning coding, heads down, a member of a team, and through my 11, almost 12 years, I got to the point where I was building teams and thinking about the other people on my team. And not only thinking about the people on my team, but thinking about how we interacted with other parts of the organization. And this really drove home to me because this is exactly what I would encounter. It didn't matter how great my code base was. At the end of the day, if the members of the team, if we couldn't communicate effectively, then the process wasn't great and our products weren't great at the end. So this issue is actually what drove me to start to focus on organizations and structures. And I know this is a conference about CSS, but we work together as people, and we work under organizations. And really, when I think about organizations, I view them as a place which just interactions with human beings. So this became the question that I've actually been driven by for the last year and a half. How do we design our organizational structures for participation? To actually allow for participation to happen. And beyond that, how do we ensure that we have a balance of the bottom up with the top down, and we don't end up with too much of the other? And this comes to how are we going to effectively work in our organizations? Because if we don't, our products aren't going to be as great. And so while I'm still writing CSS, I assure you, I still and JavaScript, I'm actually also doing a lot of other things. I'm learning a lot about ethnography and research. And to answer this question, I want to share a story with you. And this is the story that, for me, really married my call to action on my last talk, which was really, let's think about the human layer of what we're doing, right? Let's think about the collaboration and what our tools are enabling. And so finding out about what happened in Taiwan and the history of Taiwan became this big revelation for me. So if you don't mind, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Taiwan. In 2014, there was an occupation in Taiwan. It's called the Sunflower Movement. And what happened was that the government of Taiwan tried to pass a closed-door deal with China. And there was this great media org named Watch Out that was already starting to live broadcast and stream the events of the proceeding. And so when they found out, this news got on the internet, and in less than 5 minutes, students and citizens of Taiwan decided to occupy their parliament. This is like in the US occupying the White House, in Europe occupying just the biggest seat of government that you could find. And they barricaded it, and they set themselves up there. And they were there for over a month. And it wasn't mayhem. It wasn't as if they weren't accomplishing anything. They actually were leading a nonviolent occupation. And one of the most interesting things was that they were showing the government how they wanted the government to respond. So they set up live streaming infrastructure. They held debates and discussions in the streets. And this was powered by their civic tech community, by an open source community, by a group of people like ourselves that love code and believe that working collaboratively in an open source way can lead to change. And it did lead to change. The government was, in fact, so kind of embarrassed by what happened that they invited one of the members from the civic tech community to enter government. And they implemented a process called VTaiwan. And VTaiwan is a process that's used to co-create legislation, right? This is, to me, the ultimate marriage of the bottom-up power with the top-down, or the bottom-up with the top-down power. And they're using this legislation to do things, for example, to regulate what to do about Uber. Instead of London deciding to shut it down, they decided to take this into a discussion. They use this to figure out what to do about Airbnb and how to regulate most of net laws. And so I went digging, and I was like, there has to be something like some amazing technical piece of software that's behind this. And there wasn't. There was this really simple facilitation method called the Focus Conversation Method, or ORID, which stands for Objective, Reflective, Interpretive, and Decisional. And I've renamed this to something very simple. It starts with finding facts. And we need to be clear about what those facts are. And along with the facts, it's OK. We need to sort out the feelings. What do people feel about this stuff? And then we can start collecting ideas. And finally, we can get decisions. And I think that this is a wonderful framework to think about what our design systems are doing and how to go about building them in a way that doesn't lead to issues of rejection, even though I'll show you how that's a part of it. So if we think about our design systems, when we're going to start gathering our facts, the first thing that we want to do is find out what currently exists. Who are the stakeholders? What's out there in our organization that we can build off of? And then we need to find the feelings. And this is a really important one, and one where you're probably going to get a lot of emotions. But if you, working on the design system, are approaching this as an idea of I am facilitating, I am listening, then you can kind of step back, right? We should be asking people how they think this thing should work. This is the time to ask people their feelings about naming, right? Or how we should organize stuff. Let's get all the feelings out. How do people feel about our existing design system if we had one, or our existing attempt to make one? What worked? What didn't? And once we get to this, we can start to generate ideas, right? What should our tooling be? How's it going to work? How will the team begin to interact with it? And then we can document our decisions, and we should document our decisions. And they should point back to that whole process so people can see why we made the choices that we made. And we should be transparent. So at the end of the day, what facilitation is doing is really making an action or process easier. And our design systems do this, right? They make coding easier. You don't have to repeat the same code. Ideally, if they're well documented, they help you find answers to the questions that you may have so you don't have to implement it. And so a facilitator is the person that is in charge of sort of designing this process. And they think a lot about what things can they do all along the way to make the action or the whole journey much easier. So really, design is facilitation. So design is, at the end of the day, right? We're trying to make something easier, more coherent, less opaque. And so our design practices that we really are using are designed to help make our processes a lot easier and to help us arrive at this point of shared understanding. Stephanie Akayu-Hughes has a great video called Architecting Interactions. She's an architect, but also takes things from a systems point of view. And she says facilitating is about creating contexts that are incomplete, right? They're not quite finished. Think about our design systems. They're never quite finished, and that's OK. Also, they're impermanent, which means that they're going to change. And that's also OK. And lastly, they're imperfect. And I don't know about you, but every design system that I've built is pretty imperfect, although while it gets the job done. And so the way that I like to think about this is each stage of our design system is facilitating a context, and it's creating an environment. And this is the environment where we can get things done as people, right? And that environment is really helping us achieve a sense of shared understanding for that moment, so that we can move forward and make another decision. And this is a cyclical thing that we work through on our design systems. They never end. Where we start is not where we'll end up. And so constantly, we're just thinking about creating these environments that allow for conversation and allow for us to get to a point of shared understanding to take the next step forward. So really what we're doing is we're designing the context for interactions. And I think about our design systems as one level up. When we think about them in the place of our organizations, they're designing those interactions, the interactions that we have between people in different departments, right? This is another great talk by Jess Clark, and I highly recommend it. It's called Evolving Your Design System, People, Product, and Process. And she talks about the different stages that the LinkedIn design system went through. And she divides her process, each of these, communication, collaboration, coordination, and contribution, to her represent an event that happens at each stage of your design process as it matures. And I would like to say that if our design systems are actually facilitators, then these are the things that we need to be designing for and accounting for at every stage of the process from our design system, even though it may change, right? So communication in the early days of a design system might be really informal and really loose and just tapping someone on the shoulder. And the collaboration as well might not be, super defined. And your contribution to allow other people to contribute to your design system might look more like send me an email when you want something, right? But as this evolves, you begin to think about ways that you can be more communicative with other people in the organization, that you can increase collaboration, that you can mitigate and design for better coordination, and that you can have better contribution. Maybe your dream state is getting this to a pull request. But I want to urge us to think about how we are designing our systems to account for these processes at all levels, and not view it as an evolution that happens as we get better and better. We have more better ways of contribution. It's more as our context and our needs change, we evolve our process. So really, our design systems are facilitating multi-stakeholder discussion and needs. And this becomes really, really challenging in our current organizations because most of our organizational structures aren't set up to make this easy, which is why I suddenly realized how important a design system is and what it really means when an organization says, we're undertaking a design system. So I'd like to start this section by thinking about this quote. There's this misconception of the independent existence, right? There is no such mode of existence. Every entity is to be understood in terms of the way it is interwoven with the rest of the universe. And when I think about this in the context of our organizations, I'm thinking about this issue, where we often have these org charts, this command and control pattern, even though the universe doesn't work that way. The universe is more like this collaborative, decentralized, resilient network. And furthermore, what's challenging is our design systems are actually about the collaborative network. And we're trying to get to that while we're existing in this extremely centralized model. So perhaps, to me, one of the most powerful things that our design systems do when they're introduced into an organization is they become one of the first manifestations of a team that is trying to work across all of these silos. And face it, that is really hard because our structures aren't set up for that. So you're doing an amazing job if you're pushing this through. So these are two articles that came out a couple years ago. One is by Nathan Curtis, and the other one is a response by Gina. And Nathan is looking at various models for how to scale a design system. And he talks about three. He says there's this sort of solitary overlord model, that there's one person that makes the design system, and they're super excited, and they're hyper-focused on their team's needs. I was definitely that person for a while. It's easy to be that person if you push this thing forward. There's a centralized pattern, which is a single central design team that produces and supports the system, and everyone else is using it. And then there's this concept of a federated pattern, so designers from multiple teams come decide on the system together. And while it is always best, I think, to aim for a type of cross-functional team where we're really pulling the people that we need from the different departments to make our design systems, I think that if we take this idea of a design system as a facilitator, it's also okay if you happen to be that solitary person working on your design system. What that means is that you need to design all of your processes to be incredibly open and to go out into the organization and to find out what the people actually need. So you're really going to be not only the developer of the design system, but a UX researcher team of one, which is really hard. But that is a way to get started, and I believe by doing that, you won't end up with a design system that actually feels like an overlord, because the process by which you designed it was more of a facilitatory process. So because our systems aren't, our organizational systems aren't actually set up for design systems, and a lot of the battle of the design system is to get that buy-in so that you can make your cross-functional team, resistance and chaos are always going to be a part of the process. We just must embrace it now, all right? And if we can embrace this, we can also get out of it and see how we can help facilitate the processes to make this more manageable. So here are two, I'm going to share two design models. This is the double diamond design model, which basically states that as you start with a problem, you're going to have divergent thinking, and then you're eventually going to define it, and you're going to converge. But then you're going to have an answer, and again, as you generate ideas, you're going to get divergent thinking, and as you start to test them, you're going to converge. And I view this as just something to accept, right? This might feel really chaotic to people that, oh my gosh, why do we have so much divergent thinking again? Can't we just all agree? And it's okay. It's totally just part of the process. And I think that if we can make this clear, too, as facilitators, as people here to guide members of our orgs through this, it helps them understand that there will be a solution at the end. The other model that I recently came into and I wanted to share because it really helped me just become zen with chaos and resistance in organizations is this satir change model. And this actually comes from family therapy. But the idea is that in our organizations, we've got this state of late status quo. And we're going to introduce, we want to change. And so this foreign element comes into play. And in this case, our foreign element is the design system and the design system team. And as soon as any foreign element is introduced into the existing system, it's a period of chaos. It's absolute chaos, right? People become emotional. They have their own feelings. They don't want to use it. They say it was better the way it was before. You're constantly fighting until suddenly this thing starts to take root, and you can see this transformation into an idea. And eventually it becomes part of our practice, and we integrate it, and then we end up at a new level, right? And we're at this new level until the next thorn, the next foreign element enters, and we begin this again. And so as we're building design systems, if we can really think about ways to facilitate through that chaos, and this is part of why also taking on these facilitation models by talking to people and not being in our solitary teams, by finding out how they're feeling about stuff, really helps us make our way through the change model. So really what we should be focusing on is the outcomes in our design systems and not the outputs, because the outcomes are actually what drive impact. And the outputs in a design system I like to think about as the components, right? And so you might want to have a design system that has tons of outputs. You've covered all the possible component patterns. You did it. Everything is in the system. Hurrah. But that's not going to be great, because in taking that approach, in order to do that, you might find yourself trampling over people, right? So if we focus more on what we're hoping that these things will do in our organization, such as facilitate conversation, be that spark of interaction, I think that we can design, it'll help us design these better systems. And so it's really about building as much as we need when we need it. What I want to say here is, please don't be embarrassed about your design system if your design system is a PDF, or if your design system is a sketch file, or if your design system has red line marks on it. Please don't be embarrassed if your design system isn't in a fancy repo and has all these amazing components that you can import. You were building what you needed for that moment in time, right? You were trying to focus on that outcome. Starting with a PDF might get you to a point where you've designed a context where at least you can have discussions. And that's really what matters. In the next stage, you can think about evolving it to meet the needs of your team. And so really, again, I cannot stress, focus on those outcomes. Really assess your teams and determine what it is that you need. A lot of times, I really think that it is about communication and talking and breaking down those silos and the human-to-human interactions. So really, when we think about designing sustainably and designing sustainable systems, it's really about facilitating a process, which is what we're doing with our design systems. And we're empowering that system to deal with change. And this is what makes it proactive and more resilient and able to anticipate the futures of what will come. In another model, it's called Stafford Beer's viable system model, he talks about this concept of autopoiesis, which is the idea that a system has everything inside of it that it needs to better itself and to get better. In our bodies, this is the mitochondria. It has everything it needs to take care of itself and to replicate. So in our design systems, if our design systems are facilitators, I like to think of it that we have designed these contexts and we have a collection of processes that we can constantly use and employ to help our design systems grow. And so for me, it goes back to that focused conversation method and remembering to listen, and also remembering that what we're doing is looking to create these incomplete, these impermanent, and these imperfect structures, because that is setting up the first environment and the first context for our discussions. And so lastly, I want to leave you with a quote from one of my favorite heroes. This is Audrey Cheng. She is currently the digital minister in Taiwan and running the VTaiwan process. And she says, "Deliberation, listening to each other deeply, thinking together, and working something out that we can all live with is magical." And this, to me, is really the beauty behind our design systems and what we're getting at. We're deliberating, we're exchanging ideas, and we're trying to arrive at a final product, that design system. But let's not get so focused in the design system, and let's remember that that process in and of itself is actually, to me, one of the most magical parts about creating these. Thank you so much.